Howdy, we're gathering parts for the low dollar 318 grand finale exit. Continuation from our last video. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Anyways, to get it back to where it was, we needed a cast intake. This is a $20 cast intake. Gaskets, had those laying around, and it originally had an Edelbrock Performer on it. So we're gonna, in its place, since that carburetor's long gone, use our AVS that we bought here a while back. And that should put the low dollar 318 right back where it was in 2016. Should be set to get going. But actually, here I want to show you how I prep a factory cast intake for my cars. And I have one that hasn't been touched, so we can compare and show the difference. Maybe give a tip or two. That would be good, wouldn't it? First, let's look at the factory cast as it was cast. If it's 74 or newer, you're probably looking at a EGR valve, which will lead you to this inside the intake ports. Of course, this over here is your choke to work your choke. Another thing that you'll notice is some ports, and these are just vacuum ports for like a brake booster hose or any other thing like that. But one thing that should jump out at you is the design of this is spread bore. Somebody talks about spread bore, this is what they're talking about. Small in the front, very large in the back. And two problems with this. Number one, if you want to run a square bore car, which most of your aftermarket carbs are, you're going to need to square something up, or in the very least you'll be running an adapter. The other thing is these mounting holes are narrower than a Holly that a lot of people will generally run a Holly or a Brawler, and these are narrower. So let's talk about a little bit about that. Let's talk about the mods to the intake first, and then we'll talk about how to actually mount different style of carburetors on here. That's important. So if you look at the factory and the one that I modified, you can obviously see the difference. That's how it looked, and this is what I did. And I basically just narrowed this down. I cut this down, and the method you use is up to you. I just used a 4-inch cutting wheel and just basically snipped right up the side. There's a ledge here. You can about see where you need to go, and just zip up the edge, squared it away. So to clean this, we took it to a car wash before painting it, and we blew out all the ports and everything with high pressure, all of that, you know, to make sure it's out of the ports. That's bad if it's in the ports, that grinding. Anyways, another thing besides squaring up the carburetor is, if you look inside the port, you can see that this has been capped. And all this is unscrewing this. So you might have to put some heat to it or a big breaker bar. You screw in a plug like this and you cap that. And if you look, that's been done on the bottom too. And I took this off so you can see what's underneath of there. If you take this off, this is what it looks like. And you can see we got a plate over here. Now, for me, this right here was already done when I bought this, but but I've done it before, and that's how you would do it. And another thing you can do is you can plug off these heat crossovers. This has been done. If you see that, that should be a direct hole all the way through. It is not. And that's pretty much how I prep a cast intake. I square up here so I can run my square bore. If you're running a thermal quad or a spread bore, it's not necessary to do this, but I set this up for a square bore. I plugged off this part of it, and you know, the things that I showed you. That's how I prep it, besides the cleaning and painting. And now I'm going to show you ways to mount different carbs, and let's look at that. First of all, if you got a thermal quad or a spread bore, right on top is how you'll do it. You give the thermal quad gasket that sits there. That's all good. But if you want to run a square bore, if you want to mount that, if you don't want to mess with any of this, I literally could mount this with this adapter. This adapter is, well, this one here's a Mr. Gasket, but other ones make it. It's one of those deals at a swap meet. It's in the $3 box, literally. But anyways, if you want to go spread bore to square bore, see how that's a spread bore? And there's different styles too. You put that like that. Of course, you'd have a gasket there, right? You would take your spread bore gasket. It would go there. You would put this down, spread bore down. And then you would put these inside here. And you got to make sure, if you have to grind a little off, if you got the wrong bolts, this has got to be submerged below this surface. And you would just put all these in. But before you do that, you would literally put this. See how this has got a hex in it? This right here would go like this in that hex. See how that's inverted? So you would literally put them in there and go like this with it. And you would tighten these down. You'd have one of these on every corner. And then you could put your actual, this is the size of a Holly here. You could put these on like that with a gasket on in between. You could mount your square bore on, or just a plain Holly on top of this, or a Edelbrock like this. See, this actually fits then that way. But if you do that, this is what it's going to look like inside there. You can see you still got the spread bore design. If I'm going to run a square bore, I prefer to do it this way. And I'm going to run this Edelbrock. It means it's got the 2 holes here. So it actually has the same. All right. So this is how I'm going to mount it. I'm going to put the spread bore gasket down. And I wouldn't even have to. I could literally put this down. You got to have the 2 hole ones. Either one will work, right? This or this. And then I'm just going to put this on it. This is a flat piece that will square. And this is like a $12 piece. I'm going to put that flat piece on there just so it squares everything up and it gives it a flat surface to mount to. It's just better surfacing that way. And I'm going to put these in here just for temporary, just to show you. There we go. That's just a guide. See how that is? And then I put this right on top. Like this. And I'm still using the Thermal Quad original mount, but I just use that to square it up and give it a better mating surface. Now watch this. I can go all the way open with this throttle. It's all the way open. It's hitting the, over here, it's hitting the mechanisms. See that? It's wide open with no interference. Now watch this. The reason why I did this is because if I take this same setup and go over here, like this, I'll show you what happens. There you go. Now put this on there. Watch that carburetor. See that? It's lifting up. See that lift up? And it's lifting up because the butterflies are hitting right here. See, I ain't got no gap here. Now watch when I put this over here. Look at it, it's got the space for it. That's the reason why I grind them out. Now, again, if you wanted to avoid that, you literally can use this piece how I showed. But this is how we're gonna mount it, and this is what it's gonna be when we're done. Again, if I wanted to, at this point, I don't need these screws. I can just literally go like this and put another gasket on top. If I wanted a 1-inch spacer, it's just gotta have the 4 holes like that. See? Of course, I would need a longer stub there. Now I got a 1-inch spacer in there besides. I'm not running the 1-inch spacer, but that's how, well, there's multiple ways you can do it, but that's how I'm gonna mount this. But remember, if you're working off the standard thermal quad original mounts, you gotta have the kind of gaskets with 2 holes, because if you get the 1-hole gasket, it's gonna be like this, and it's not gonna fit. Too wide. So that is just about a wrap on how I prepare an intake. It does take a little bit of time and work, and that's how I mount the carburetor on. That's how I'm gonna do it. Just thought I would share it with you. Might help somebody. This is my $20 intake, and about probably a total of 4 hours of my time, but that's okay. Well, I better get it mounted. Winter's here.